Hello, everyone. Welcome to eShe TV. I'm Aekta Kapoor. Today, I'll be speaking to one of India's most successful corporate leaders, also called Girl with the Broken Neck, Radhika Gupta. Hi, Radhika. Welcome to eShe TV. I'm so excited to have you here.
Hi, really nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
So, for those of our very few viewers and listeners who don't know about Radhika, she's the MD and CEO of Edelweiss Asset Management. She's one of the youngest CEOs in India's financial services sector. And besides her success in the corporate world, she's also an inspiration and role model for a whole generation of young women and men. Her talk, called Girl with the Broken Neck, went viral on the internet, and she's now written a book titled Limitless: The Power of Unlocking Your True Potential. So I really love this book, and I've got copies to send to both my daughters. This is not just a biography of her life, but it's also full of real practical and advice and tips and motivation for anyone who's seeking to grow, not just in their career, but I would also say in their life. So Radhika, you've shared your personal story in this book. What would you say has been the most important growth phase in your life, and can you tell us a little about it?
That's a hard question, Ekta. Most important growth phase. I think yes, as I say in the book, I think we're all work in progress. We are all constantly work in progress.
Hmm.
And but I do believe that the 20s and 30s in your career, I think that phase after sort of graduating from college, and
Yeah.
discovering your early career, figuring out what you want to do, going
Hmm.
through your first bout of rejection, navigating the workplace, it's an important phase,
Yeah.
which is why I chose to focus on that phase, because I think I learned and I have learned a lot in that 22 to 35 sort of phase.
Yeah.
So I think it's an extraordinary phase. You are at, in some sense, the peak of your energy, the peak of your potential,
Yeah.
and you're not cynical about the world. And yet you're making mistakes. So I think it's a phenomenal phase.
Yeah, that's right. And you also, at that phase of your life, you also went through a lot of major changes. You moved countries, you started your own business and everything. So it was quite a remarkable phase for you. You've also talked in this book about your husband, your parents, your former bosses, your colleagues. Was it difficult to write about people who are your acquaintances, and did it get awkward for you at times? You're sharing your journey with them. You're sharing their stories, in fact.
So Ekta, no one's asked me this question, but so I'm reflecting on it as you ask me. I think I have used a lot of stories of people close to me, when I've been speaking, and sometimes without their permission, and of course, in a way that is positive, in a way where you can take away something from them, and I think there is resonance with those stories. I remember years ago I had done a talk that talked about stories about my mother, because
Hmm.
someone had once asked me that, what do you learn from your mom? And I had done this talk about mom's lessons being the MBA Academy. And there was so much resonance around that talk. And everyone sort of connected it with the story of their mom and what she had taught. And I think my learning is that, while we are inspired by stories of great leaders that we have never met, both for me and for people around, all of us, you, anyone, there are great stories and lessons in our homes.
Hmm.
And so that's a philosophy that's been very close to me for the last couple of years, and I've been using it in talks. And so I said, why not the book? So yes, it wasn't awkward. Sometimes I had to think of how to say things the right way. I of course spoke to a lot of people for permissions, but everyone was very kind to let me share the stories that they did. So it was not awkward, but I definitely had to think through how to share these stories and these sensitive and delicate stories in the right way.
Yeah. Yeah. Correct. So, also coming to the fact that you're right now at a higher point in your life, and you're still relatively young. There's still a long way to go. So, why did you decide to write this book at this point? What was the inspiration behind it?
I'd say it's some combination of chance, COVID, and challenging my own beliefs. Um,
Okay.
at some, and it's perhaps appropriate that it's called Limitless in that sense. I think a book was always something I wanted to do, but like many people, I believed that it's something that you do much later in your life.
Mm.
When you have gray hair, when you've
Yeah.
retired, etc. It's just a
Yeah.
standard thing. And then COVID happened, and I had time, because I
Uh-huh.
was not traveling. I usually traveled 3 days a week domestically,
Uh-huh.
and often on weekends. So now I was
Mm.
sitting at home. I was not traveling at all. And then Hatchet came to me, and this conversation happened, and I said, "No, this is a bad idea."
Mm.
And the question you asked me is a good one because, as I felt, what do you have to say at this age? What they told me, I think, really resonated with me, which is that we're not static people, right? We
Mm.
have a voice, and that voice evolves. And there is a voice at 40, and that voice perhaps can talk about your experiences over the last 15 years very closely. There is a voice at 60, and there are different versions of us and different perspectives of us. So break that. I mean, speaking of limitless and limitations, break that limitation also, that is in your own head. And so this is my perspective of a journey, over the last 15 years. And as I say in the introduction, I may write something else 15 years later and just rubbish everything else I've said, because people grow and people change.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, that makes me look forward to, what next you're going to write 15 years or maybe a few
Yeah, but
years from
that's a
now.
while away. That's a
Yeah.
long time away.
Yeah. Did writing this book change things for you?
Um, I enjoyed it. I have to
Mm.
say, writing is harder than I've always been someone who likes writing. And the other thing I was very clear about is when I do the book, you know, I will all the lines, all the words, everything will be me. So I think I realized it's harder than even I thought it would be. I think that was curating all the content was hard, and I think clarifying. The beautiful thing about writing is it gives you the ability to clarify your thoughts, and then when someone reads your mumbo jumbo of thoughts, you realize actually it's clear in my head, but it's not clear on paper. So I think it exposed me to that process, and it was very clarifying. But I always say that everybody should write. You don't have to write a book, but you can write an article, you can write on social media. I think everybody should write.
Mm. Mm. There are some, in fact, amazing lessons in leadership and management in this book. But if you had to share the top two tips for success for us, what would they be?
If you had to ask me my single favorite chapter,
Mm.
Ekta, it would probably be the last one,
Yeah.
and that's about finding self confidence.
Yeah.
Because I think that's at the crux of so many things, right? It's at the
Mm. Mm.
crux of success, it's at the
Mm.
crux of happiness. So,
Mm.
if you had to ask me my personal favorite one,
Mm. Mm.
that would be one.
Yeah.
The other one, where the stories are a personal favorite, is the whole chapter on accepting change.
Yeah.
A lot of the other themes you see covered in books, change is a topic that's very close to me because of the background I came from, the fact that we grew up across multiple countries.
Mm.
And chapter 4 has stories of my parents, my growing up.
Mm.
So, in that sense, that's very close to my heart. So, I
Mm.
think the bit about finding self confidence, and the bit about changing, adapting, and as I say, not comparing yourself to other people.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, coming to your talk that went viral, you mentioned in the book that this was the second time that you actually gave this talk. You had given this talk earlier, and then you learned from it how to improve yourself, and then the second time it really took off. And
Yeah.
but tell me, why did you choose to title it "Girl with the Broken Neck" when we all know there's so much more to you than that?
And I have got the mixed reactions when the title released also, and even in now, if you go to the YouTube comments, again, I think this is the first time I'm answering this question. There are some people who say, "Oh, she's the CEO of a then 20,000, this 80,000 crore company. Why did she have to reduce it to that?" The talk came. I talk about Captain Raghuraman in the book.
Yeah.
The title was, we were exploring title options,
Mm.
and this was one that came from him. I think my brother used to call me the kid with a broken neck. So I think many good things in life also come from little brothers, and should give him that credit. And he said, I think this kind of works. I said, he used to call me that, and we were debating, and we felt it was raw, and we felt it was simple. I think we were also, even debating the fact that it was girl or woman.
Yeah.
And one of the things I wanted to put out there is, and I talk about it in Limitless also, is the discomfort you have with your looks, especially when you're growing up, which is why we use the word girl, not woman. So I think
Mm.
that was it. It was
Mm.
organic, it was raw.
Mm.
And, I hoped, and I think because of that title,
Mm.
a lot of people write back to me, as I said in the book, with issues that they've had, especially physical issues, etc., etc. So
Mm.
perhaps the hope was that we could give people the confidence to face those kind of issues.
Yeah. Yeah, in fact, that's a very important part. That's the whole chapter that you've addressed in the
Yeah.
book about coming to terms with your so-called flaws and imperfections, and really owning them and really, moving forward with them. So I think that's a very valid point. And now that you've had experience in the corporate sector for so many years, um, do you think companies that have more diversity at the especially at the top leadership levels, do they perform better as well? I mean, not just in terms of gender, but also in terms of race, disability, sexual orientation, and so on?
They will have to at some level, and I'm so glad, Ekta, you said diversity is not just gender one. Because it really isn't. I think, and companies, diversity as an agenda, I always believe, will flourish when you think it is more than a social cause. When corporates start believing that diversity actually adds a economic value, it helps the bottom line.
Right.
I think when you are catering to, I'm in a consumer business. Um, when you're catering to a consumer base that is diverse, that
Yeah.
has men, women, young people, older people, transgender, everything, then
Yeah.
the design, if it has to be effective, the marketing, if it has to be
Mm.
effective, the
Mm.
thinking, if it has to be effective, has to be diverse. So I don't see how diversity will not contribute to the bottom line. There's a old puzzle or game that you may remember from childhood, many versions of it, that if there are three people who, three men paint a wall in X many hours, how long will it take for men to paint the same wall? I don't think it works like that. People are not homogeneous. I mean, you don't want people to paint the wall in identical time, in identical hours. You want different colors on that wall, and you want different perspectives. So I genuinely believe that one, diversity will succeed when we understand the bottom line contribution of diversity, and secondly, if we're catering to a consumer base that's diverse. I mean, you look at the recent example, and I also represent the capital markets. I think, regardless of what you think of the valuations of a company like Nika, when it listed, it showed you the potential of the woman consumer.
Yeah.
Now, someone clearly looked at that potential and found that potential, right?
Mm.
And that someone happened to be a woman founder. That's just one example.
Yeah. Yeah. But we're talking about women leading companies. At present, women still make up a very small percentage of employees in the organized sector, and we know there are many reasons for this. There are social restrictions. There's lack of education and opportunity, lack of infrastructure, lack of facilities. So there are various reasons for this, and many people have suggested that having more women in the leadership position would help. But from your experience, does it really? I mean, does it help if you have women leaders? Does that help having more women in the ranks as well?
Ika, I think yes. I think Sheryl Sandberg's talked about this. Others have talked about it. I think it does for two reasons. One is that you have more role models within an organization. So
Right.
a woman leader who's just a woman who's just joining the organization then sees that you can have more women, and that I can make it to the top. I think the Indian banking industry has been a big beneficiary of this, which is why financial services in some way has been sort of at the forefront of women's leadership because we've had so many women there. I know in my own organization now, 30% or 25% of our leadership team is women. There are lots of places where we have work to do. But in addition, not many people know that in addition to a female CEO, we also now have a woman chief operating officer. Again, first to
Okay. Yeah.
industry. Um, the second reason I think it helps is policies. So, policies just tend to, because you have one or two women at the top going through a certain set of experiences, could be maternity. I mean, I'm doing this conversation in pregnancy. My COO had a baby. Suddenly, policies tend to be a little more empathetic and thought through, and they're more than paper policies, right? So, lots of organizations have great paper policies, but I think policies tend to be thought through, and I think culture tends to be thought through. So, when you have, and again, I come from capital markets, where at least the mass media portrays it out to be very alpha male and very sort of dog eats dog. I think culture changes when you have more women on the floor.
Yeah, I also think a lot of people have talked about when women are in leadership positions, men as well, and everybody in the company feels more. There's more risk taking, behavior because people feel more comfortable taking risks, and in fact, that's a chapter in your book as well about taking risk. And many cases the risk pays off, and sometimes it doesn't as well. So, would you like to share about that aspect, that chapter that you've talked about risk taking, and why it's important to take risks early on in your career as well?
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting time to also have a conversation about risk taking because, but perhaps living in an India that is opening up to taking risks. I talk about this in the book also, but
Yeah,
you're living in startup era, unicorn era, Shark Tank era, all of that stuff is happening, and yet
yeah,
you're also living in an era where um, people find it difficult to change a job from a big brand because they're worried about what people will say.
yeah,
People don't even want to work for an unknown manager.
yeah,
So you have both of these dichotomies, and I always feel that risk taking. The reason I wrote about this chapter because I was like, what do I have new to add to this topic? I think the reason I wrote about this chapter is people always think of risk as binary. It's like, taking a risk means quitting your job and starting a company. And I don't think risk taking is binary. I think it is a spectrum. And not everyone's actually built out to do a startup, but people can take risks in the context of a corporate career. People can take small, small risks. So I think that's why I wrote the chapter. And it's not unbridled. Again, I'm in the markets profession. Our business is to take sensible risks. And so I think I talk about taking sensible risks,
yeah,
takeable risks, and addressing some of the issues that come with risk taking, including challenges with family, challenges with lifestyle, challenges with comparisons to people around you. I mean, these are real issues.
yeah. In fact, your own experiences are about taking a risk. You left a corporate job in the US where you talked about buying your first Louis Vuitton bag, and then you moved to India to become an entrepreneur, starting from scratch and driving a little car, not taking a salary for a long time. So that was a big risk, and that was a choice you made. Uh, Coming to the context of being a woman entrepreneur and being a working woman, how would you compare your experiences, your challenges in India versus in the US?
Okay, so, and I've said this in the book. I don't love the question about challenges as a woman.
Hmm.
Not because there aren't any, but I don't want to obsess over it. I am fully appreciative of the fact that I think any woman out there hasn't had it easy. It's just not possible. Um, if she has, she's been very kind. If you ask me to compare India and the US, I actually don't think there's that much of a difference. In fact, I probably had the harder stint in India because of my entrepreneurial days. But I think Indian financial services, and maybe perhaps this is the industry I'm from, has actually been very welcoming to women. So I think the challenges are common whether you are in India or the US. I haven't found India to be difficult. In fact, I found India to be easier.
Okay, that's interesting that you say that because we have this impression of, women have it easier in the US and the corporate world, and they have more rights, more freedoms, more personal freedoms as well. So it's interesting that you're saying that as a financial services, the industry
Yeah,
is more
I also
open.
think that we have more support systems here, and
Mm.
as I said, I'm in the family way. And by the way, I say everything with a tremendous position of privilege, so I'm not denying that at all. But I also think we have the benefit of more support systems, more security to go through certain phases of our life.
Yeah,
I think the environments are different. There are different challenges in both.
yeah.
But I think in most industries, if you're building a corporate career, things have gotten very professionalized. And as I said, I probably represent the industry that's been at the forefront of women's leadership.
Yeah, that's it's very inspiring for a lot of people. In fact, in a lot of middle class families, finance was at one point it was not considered a career for women, but in this generation, it's very much so, and it's considered a very good career for women as well, for young girls. You've also talked in the book about your husband Nalin's experience with uh, running the marathon and how he took it 1 kilometer at a time, and how it's important to have these incremental uh, to work with small targets, with small goals. And then you also talked about one of your colleagues, selling SIPs and starting with 20 and cheering for every 21 sales that they did. So can you tell us about how in your life you felt that you've had these phases where you had a small target but you went after it and then it ended up with a big win at the end?
In fact, I think in my entire career in life, I've never got things on a platter. I've always built small.
Mm,
And sometimes I keep saying that I'm perennially in startup mode because even when I joined Database Mutual Fund as CEO,
mm,
I joined a very small entity. And
mm,
I joined a small entity, but with big dreams. And
mm,
as a business head, perhaps one of the things that is closest to my heart is the
mm,
power of execution and the
mm.
power of just getting things done. And I do
Yeah,
believe that getting things done happens by just doing them incrementally.
yeah.
So many of the times, and I think I share this experience of how people who started businesses keep coming to talk to me, and I tell them, just go out there and start getting things done,
Mm,
because the practical world will teach you a lot, and you will get better and better, not from theory and conversation, but just from doing. So I truly believe that businesses are not built in a boardroom, but in a battlefield. I mean, I can't. This is something very, very. Go out and just try and do.
yeah. Great. That's great advice, not just for, I think, like I said, not just for people in the boardroom, but in life as well. There are a lot of things that are on our minds. We just don't do them because we don't have the confidence. And you talked about applying to an Ivy League college, though you were told that the odds were, not very good in your favor as an international student. You were not likely to get a merit scholarship, but you did, and you went to an Ivy League college. So one shouldn't not try something simply because of the odds and just go for it. So really, there are a lot of lessons to learn from you and from this book. And like I said, I'm now really, really looking forward to the next one. And I wish you all the best. You're also entering a new journey in your life now. You'll probably have different kinds of lessons to share with us next time. And
Correct.
yeah.
Maybe having a baby will wipe out half the things I say, especially about execution and doing things in a small way or taking risks. So maybe
Yeah.
you live from a very different place.
And not having expectations from your kids. That too.
Yeah, maybe my
Yeah,
kids, when they don't study, will come to me with snippets of my book and say, "Don't compare me to my classmate. You said I can't do this, right?" So uh,
absolutely.
I don't know what I've set
Yeah,
myself up for.
absolutely. Yeah, parenting is, I think, a whole new kind of, a whole new
Correct.
enterprise. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So thank you so much for being here, Radhika. Thank you for your thoughts. Thank you for your time. And I wish you all the best with the book, with the baby, and with all the new challenges that are going to be coming up in your life ahead. Yeah, thanks so
Thank
much.
you.
Thanks so
Thank you. Thank
much.
you so much, Ekta.